ocean's whisper calls my name. Depth and longing in my soul, seeking more than just this game. Waves crash softly at my feet, echoes in my heart so deep. Eyes on horizon far and true, longing for a love so steep. Deep calls to deep inside of me, where the sky meets endless sea. Heartbeats blend with ocean's roar, seeking depth I can't ignore. Echoes in my heart so deep, eyes on horizon far and true, longing for a love so steep. Deep calls to deep inside of me, where the sky meets endless sea. Heartbeats blend with ocean's roar, seeking depth I can't ignore. Shells and sand beneath my toes, tides reveal what ebb and flows. In the quiet still I hear whisper longings crystal clear. Deep calls to deep inside of me, where the sky meets endless sea. Heartbeats blend with ocean's roar, seeking depth I can't ignore. Burning with the holy fire, depth of love beyond all dreams, in the vastness it redeems. Deep calls to deep inside of me, where the sky meets endless sea. Heartbeats blend with ocean's roar, seeking depth I can't ignore.
All right. Hey, everybody. Good evening and welcome to another. It's like two and within a week. That's a record for me lately. I've been it's like, it's like I do all these great ones this summer and then just all kinds of stuff kept happening and stuff kept getting shelved and canceled and reorganized and whatnot. But but I'm really glad you're here. This is kind of a departure from the normal stuff that I do. But I'm really excited about this because I think this is a very important topic we're going to get into. So I want to welcome, for the first time on my Deep Calls Deep, so I'm very excited about this, Mr. Jaylen Thompson. Jaylen is on Faith Unaltered, Cosmic Corner, and a solid dude I have come to love and respect a lot. So welcome to the channel.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the great intro. I appreciate that.
No problem. So for the people who don't know who you are, Jaylen, just kind of give us just a minute or two about yourself, and what you do on Faith Unaltered and why this is such an important and fun topic to get into.
Yeah. I'm Jaylen Thompson. I am I'm honestly a layman within the body of Christ. I don't hold any special titles. I'm just somebody who I'm trying to love the Lord with my heart, soul, and mind. I'm married. My wife of 8 years. I have a 3-year-old daughter who's autistic, and really enjoying this process with her, raising her, developing her. That's a lot of fun. The way I got involved with Faith Unaltered was with my brother Josh. He and I co-host Cosmic Corner. It's really his baby that he was developing, and then I kind of came along the journey. It was like, hey, I'll walk with you, and and we've been doing so ever since. Josh is awesome. I don't, maybe if I had a niche in Christianity or something like that, I would say it's probably along the veins of like apologetics and and things of that nature. I want to be careful with apologetics, apologetics in the biblical sense of giving an answer for the hope that lies within us, and doing so with gentleness and respect, not just, what it's turned into on social media, which is just arguing for the sake of being right. I have no interest in doing that whatsoever. I've been down that rabbit hole and it leads nowhere. But yeah, that's a little bit about me. And I'm looking forward to having this conversation today. I know I made a post about a week ago that kind of spurred this whole thing, and I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Yeah. Okay. So, and Josh, is that better? Because Josh was saying I was having some weird feedback in my mic, so I unplugged it and plugged it back in. So hopefully, let me guys know if you're still hearing it or if that fixed it. Because I'm totally tech stupid and have no clue how to fix it if there is something wrong with it. I don't know. We'll just do the best we can. So yeah. So about a week or so ago, you put a post up on Facebook, I think, about that anyone who is a YouTube content creator needs to be an active participant member of a physical church.
Correct.
And I really was fascinated by the feedback and how many people were trying to argue with you that wasn't necessary. And I was actually found that pretty shocking.
Yeah.
Tell me about your thoughts on that, because that was to me a surprise.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. There was a fair bit of people that also agreed as well, right? But yeah, there were some people that had some pushback against the idea of if you're going to be a Christian influencer or content creator in the social media space, that you need to participate in the gathering of believers and be physically present with them. I was shocked by it. And I was also shocked too by the level of nuance that people were willing to go to in order to justify their position in not gathering with the fellow believers on a consistent basis. The level of intellect that people were trying to exercise to essentially just say, I'll get my gathering of the brethren, in some other sort of way, right? It was also all the hoops that we would jump through to try to justify our position, right? And it was very telling to see that, and very concerning as well for people who are Christians and who are even, some of them even very well studied, right, and well informed, that they would take such a position that is so vital to not only the Christian experience but the human experience, which is community, right, and the importance of community and fellowship and relationship. I mean, these are vital things to the human experience, not just the Christian experience. I believe it becomes all the more fulfilling in the Christian experience, but the human experience in general is a communal experience. But it was just shocking to me. It's studied and well learned in the Bible, very well versed in verse memorization, scripture memorization, and things of that nature. But to see them take something that is so vital to our experience with God and with each other, and kind of cast it to the side or downplay its importance, reduce it to almost like just some kind of social club, like a chess club meeting or something like that, some kind of leisure activity. I was floored by it. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I had several thoughts on that string, but if you have to work that hard to justify yourself, the truth is rarely complicated.
Sure.
You're the ones who complicate it to try to justify something that doesn't fit.
Right.
So when you have to work that hard to fight against a very simple, basic idea like that to me is telling. And I also I want to be careful too, and just say that yes, sometimes there are some legitimate reasons why people can't be in an embodied community. Sometimes you're housebound for whatever reason, or but there are, again, the church should also have mechanisms in place to help with that as well. So
Absolutely. Yeah. And I, I was speaking, my post was directed toward the
right,
general rule of thumb, the general
right,
consensus. I wasn't necessarily addressing every extreme. Like, for example, if the members of the church are sick, they're, like you said, bedridden or couch ridden, they can't get up. Um, you know, even people that are like in between churches and things of that
yeah,
nature. Searching for a new church home. I wasn't talking about those
right,
people. I was talking in a general sense about those of us who inhabit this YouTube space, social media space, and we are proclaiming the name of Christ and doing so from the authority of an informed member of the body. I don't want to say all of us are teachers, but we kind of are, in a certain way. Um,
right,
you kind of are when in this particular space, and you know, to do so and willingly not participate in the local church body, in a local church body,
right,
whether you're Catholic, Orthodox, or Protestant, that's, whole nother conversation for another time. I really don't, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm strictly just focused on, do you have a local body of believers that you fellowship with on a consistent basis, that know you, know your family, that know your walk with the Lord, that can hold you accountable for the things that you say online, that actively watch and participate in your online content. That, like I said, if you say something, that's out of pocket online, they can call you and say, "Hey, what the heck was that?"
right,
Or encourage you in your online space. If you don't participate in that, and it's just you, a microphone, and a camera in the basement somewhere with no accountability, no one that you have to actually deal with on a face-to-face basis, no people that you have to love on and encourage, or to love on you and encourage you and convict you and rebuke you and back and forth, iron sharpening iron that the Bible talks about. I won't listen to you, and I don't think anybody
right.
should.
I would tend to agree with you, because I think there's something about, like the church, and just and going back even further than that, just stepping back even further than that, we are created for community. That Genesis 1, you know, from the very beginning, page 1 of the Bible, we were meant to be in relationship.
Mhm.
And that was not done, with strings and tin cans from as far away as possible, kind of interactions. We were meant for that, sitting down together, participating with God together. And
Mhm.
that's one of the things, if you look at through church history, and again, I think you and I are going to say where you land right now is not relevant to this part of the conversation. So
Right.
your tradition doesn't matter here, I don't think.
I don't think so.
But we were meant to sit down and participate together. It is a communal, it's a communal activity, because a lot of looking through scripture and a lot of church history, there's so much that's built in there that's communal language, and a
Yes.
lot of the church fathers and church history writings and the deuterocanonical stuff, the Didache, which is what another reason it's important to know about this stuff, is
Mhm.
a lot of it is written in a language that corporate the body matters more, and you get to participate in that. And
Mhm.
I get blessed not only as part of the body, but I get individually blessed as part of the body. So it's just this kind of, it's so, you know, so layered. And there's so many technical layers. And if you're not there, your body should notice.
Sure.
And so, like the church that I go to now, I missed when I went on a trip out to go meet Spencer and Joshua Sherman.
Yeah.
Uh, there, I was gone for 2 Sundays in a row, and when I got back, I had about 6 ladies. When I walked in the door, like, "Where were you? We missed you, and we didn't get to see you the last couple of days." So, it definitely, they notice,
That's
and
awesome.
and yeah, and it's a beautiful thing. And so, you know, being around a group of people who notice you're not there,
Yeah.
important. And that's, and that keeps us connected. And that also keeps us accountable because, there's leaders at my church who know how they've got my channel information. They look at it. And I've actually got next month one of the guys coming on.
Nice.
On my channel, somebody from my church. So there's active engagement there, and so if I say something dumb, I'm gonna get one of them be like, "Hey, by the way,
it's awesome, and same here for me. My pastor knows that I sent him the link to this stream, right? He knows that I, about Faith Unaltered. He knows about the Identity Crisis podcast, which I was doing before Faith Unaltered. Him as well as the elders of my church. They know that I do this. They even kind of stamped and approved me to do this before I even started doing it. Speaking of like community and accountability and things like that, before I got into the online apologetic space, like doing streams like this and, Faith Unaltered, so on and so forth. I asked my wife, I was like, "Hey, I need you to be honest with me. Okay." And she was like, "Okay." Like, she kind of was like, "What are you about to ask me?" And I asked her like, "Hey, if I, were to be a online, Christian content creator, influencer, so on and so forth, based on what you know about me, would you listen to what I have to say?" And I was like, "I need you to tell me the truth." And she told me that she would. And I said, "Okay, I'll do it." But little did she know, if she would have told me, no, she wouldn't listen to me, I would have not have done this. Because that would have shown me that the lifestyle that I am living within my community, with my wife being my closest neighbor, so she knows how I'm doing. The lifestyle that I'm living within my community, I'm not ready to branch out outside of it yet, and that I need to do some more maturing before I can do that. But the fact that she said that she would listen, I said, "Okay, well if you'll listen, then I'll do it." But if my wife would not have told me that she would listen to me, that would have told me that I have some work to do. And it would have been on me to humble myself and be held accountable to the words that she said. Which is what I planned on doing. But once again, that's one of the things that community allows you to do. It allows you to not only examine yourself, but be examined by others, right? To kind of see where you are and where you need to grow.
Right, which is really important, which kind of goes into, I'm going to pull this question up now, I was going to save it for later. But it's Deborah wants to know if we think that's because churches have become so big and commercialized. And I would say, oops, I put that back up there. I would say partly, but I think too, because, and I want to be careful here, because this, again, I don't think one tradition is worse about this than the other. It just has its own forms in whichever tradition you're in.
Yeah.
But I think that this is an American problem where everything is so much about me, and I'm such an individual, and my individuality
Yes.
is the thing that becomes, I think, a pride issue that gets in my way of becoming open and vulnerable with other people. I think that's a bigger problem. And it's easier to hide in these big commercialized churches than the smaller churches, but it's still, I think, the same problem. It's so much about me and not about we, that is, I think, where it really comes from.
Yeah, and I think even that type of that thought framework actually helps to justify some Christians' belief that I don't have to go to church, or that church online is sufficient, right? And once again, I'm not talking about the extreme cases of someone sick and they need to have the online church. No, I'm talking about, I'm fine, I have no problems, I just don't want to get out of the bed as much, or I just don't feel like dealing with people. And I'd much rather just watch it right here online than get up and go engage with people and love on them and have them love on me. You know, I think that kind of flows from that individualistic me first type of thinking, because I'll wake up in the morning and I'll go, do I feel like going to church today? And then I'll make a decision based on that.
Right. And I think even more than that, Jaylen, I think it comes down for me when I'm looking at this, that this becomes even more, I just don't want to be around somebody who's going to make me think about my theology. So if I don't like what you say, I'm not going to go, because I might be in error, but I can't be wrong. So you disagree with me, so I'm not going to go there no more. Like, you know, I don't like the music there. So I'm not going to go and be challenged and to sit with, what is about this that's challenging me? What is it about what this pastor said that I don't like, that maybe I'm wrong? And so, because if it's all about me and I'm the center of the universe, I'm just going to go find somewhere else that's going to tell me what I want to hear.
Sure. And that's reflective of the fact that you're your own biggest influence, right? And so if there's no one else in the room with a say so that is as authoritative as yours, or more authoritative, you'll experience, we'll have the church hopping experience, right? We find the right one that scratches my itching ear the right way. Whether it's theologically correct or incorrect is irrelevant. It's borderline not even the point, right? It's what I want to hear. It's not even about sound theology and sound Bible and sound biblical hermeneutics. We're not even, that's not the point. The point is I had a great time here.
Yep. And you said something that didn't offend me. It didn't challenge me. It didn't make me think about me being wrong. So it is this, okay. And I'm not dunking on anyone, so I want to be careful here, but it is, I'll pick on Jonathan Pritchett because I can. So you hear Jonathan Pritchett say a lot all the time, like he'd become Catholic if they made him Pope. But it's this idea where I'm my own Pope. So I get to decide who gets to speak into me. I get to decide who has, rebukes me, who decides if my theology is incorrect, who decides if, and that is even more dangerous, I think, as you get into deciding that, like, I have something to say, so I'm going to get a camera and an internet connection, and I'm going to get on here and start talking. If there's nobody speaking into where I'm wrong, I'm going to lead a whole bunch of other people. But we also, amongst the content creator community, you get this very disembodied relationship with a lot of folks, and and those are very flat in a sense where we're not in the same space, so I can't read your body language in the way that I would if we're together, because those nuances matter, and you only see what I showed you.
Sure.
And when we're embodied, like the other day, I went to my church, and I was having a really rough day, and one of the deacons was coming into the parking lot to a building where at the same time I was, and he took one look at me, and he just came over and gave me a big old hug, and he's like, we're home. We got you. Don't worry about this. And but that's not something that I can get from you, because you're in Chicago and I'm in Portland.
Yeah, and not only that's what you needed.
Yep.
Right. Yep. I mean, don't get me wrong. If you call me with a bad day, Amber, I'll give you some encouraging words. I'll pray with you, no problem.
Yeah.
I'll pray for you all the time. But that hug that you got from him, that's what you needed. You needed a touch, right?
Yep.
Not just a spiritual one, right? Yeah, that's all I can do. That's all I can do from Chicago. But you needed a physical body to hold you, right? And once again, and I'm sure that made you feel better.
Mm-hmm. It did.
And it was better than any prayer he could have prayed at the time. It was better than any scripture he could have gave you. It was a simple human touch. And that's what we miss out on
Yeah.
when we reduce the gathering of the brethren to a kind of a social event of sort, right? Or a you know, 3 songs in a sermon, or, you know, 3 songs in a pep talk, you know, whatever you want to call it. Don't get me wrong, there are churches out there that are like that, but let's be clear, they've reduced it to that. That's not what God created. That's not what God meant. That's not what He intended. They reduced it to that, and they call it church. But then they also then wonder why they don't get the intended result that God desires for us, right?
Right. And I think there's something too about, and depending on, again, I don't want to get hung up on tradition labels here.
Mm-hmm.
There's something about sitting down together and participating in things together. So doing the Eucharist or communion together, instead of with whatever I can find in my cabinet watching church on TV, because that's, again, very disembodied.
Mm-hmm.
You're going through this experience together, you know, doing these things with people who, you know, it's not because I'm a very, like, tender-hearted person.
Okay.
In person, so I can be snarky and sarcastic, you know, online. And there's a couple guys, you know, Will Hess and Pritchett, a couple guys I get sassy with sometimes. But any of the guys that I've met, you know, like Joshua Davidson, can probably tell you that I tend to be a bit of a softie, and it's not uncommon for me to get teary in church. So there's parts of our services that I'm just pretty much given. I'm probably going to be teary or probably crying because they're so moving to me. And being in that embodied space, now I sit with women that I know and that are good friends, and they just automatically now at those points just reach over and I get hugs from them, and I just, you know, and there's that interaction of that embodiment that is so important and so beautiful, because we're sharing in those experiences, you know, and good ones, bad ones, whatever.
Yeah, and you also, not only are you sharing in the experience with them, but you're also experiencing God with them.
Yep.
Right? Like experiencing God through them. Right? Like it's all a part of it. Right? And, you know, I came to the realization some years ago now, that I am not going to be able to separate God from His children.
Mm-hmm.
Not going to be able to. There is no I love God and I hate people. You don't get to do that. You just don't. You don't get, you know, and don't get me wrong, you know, golly, people get on my nerves sometimes. They do. Right. And I'm one of them. I get on my own nerves. Right. But we don't get to do that. You don't get to separate God from His people. And it's important to highlight that and recognize that, because, you know, there are times, you know, where you'll hear people say things like, you know, I don't want to go to church and be around religious people, and, you know, religion over relationship and things of that nature. You see those type of things online, and it's like, well, newsflash, my friend, religion, understood properly, is relationship. But, you know, that's a whole other topic for another time, right? But they don't. But what they don't understand is that you're trying to separate the two as though they are. They're really not. You know, it's a very interesting thing that I kind of just noticed in you know, in the online space with that whole idea, that whole topic.
Yeah, and it also, I think, you know, it's so easy when you're doing content creation, and this is, I don't think if the people who don't realize, you know, kind of what goes into some of this work, and some of the just doing all of this, and, you know, setting all this stuff up, and the time we put into our content, and the networking that goes on, and all of the other stuff that you have to do, that also pulls you out of your embodied experience and puts you in a disembodied existence. And that can, you know, the further you get lost into that, you get content creators who just get disconnected from reality, get disconnected from, and then trying to speak to somebody when you're not connected and not grounded. It's
Yeah.
very dangerous.
And it can also distort your view of yourself,
Mhm.
right? When you try to separate the individual from the group, when the individual is always supposed to be a unit within the group, I think that you end up having some of these distorted views of ourselves, and I think that's what we're seeing play out in society. You're seeing a bunch of disembodied individuals kind of floating through life and trying to figure out meaning and all of these things. And two major distorted views that I see, and they're both on opposite ends of the spectrum here. One is, I think too highly of myself, which ends up being self-worship, right? Or I end up thinking too lowly of myself, which is like a self-hatred type of deal. And both are bad. And both are what happens when you remove the individual from the group, when you isolate the individual from the group, and self becomes the center of the universe.
Yeah, like Joshua points out here, we cannot see ourselves. We need other eyes. Mirror is not only an accountability partner.
Yes.
I love that idea, which I think is going to kind of transition us into in the disembodied experience coming into church, which is another very distressing and disturbing trend that we're starting to see. And the first time this came up to my attention, because right now I'm trying to do seminary and doing this, and I was doing several channels at the same time, and just all this craziness. I don't pay attention to the news. It stresses me out. I just don't really watch it. I can't. It stresses me out too bad.
Most of it.
Yeah, but I happened to click on some short, and if you don't click out of it, it just keeps rolling on with different, and you get this string of shorts all of a sudden. And when I was distracted and couldn't change it, it rolled into the next one, and it was talking about these churches in Western Europe somewhere that were testing prototypes of using AI as confession. So it was like Catholic churches, I think. And I was just like, that's horrific. That is absolutely horrific. But there's churches, this is not just a European thing. There's churches in America that are talking about replacing, pastoral counseling with AI. They're talking about replacing Bible studies led by a AI generated version of your pastor. Like, and I can see the need of not having enough help and overburdened leadership needing some relief and some help. I get that, but this is horrific.
Yeah, this is not the right answer.
No, not at all. It definitely, there are so many problems with this.
I mean, one of the major ones that I see, like right off the bat with it, is you're flagrantly and deliberately, like, you're tainting and ruining, disconnecting the relationship experience and dynamic that the Lord set up for his church. When you do that, when you introduce these fake humanoids, right? Let's call them those, right? Humanoids of some sort. I don't know, whatever you want to call them. When you introduce that into the picture, and you make them a part of the relationship experience, you are vandalizing the picture, and you're just ruining the relationship experience here. Not just with, but
I'm just, well, and two, there's an even bigger issue for this for me, because I go to my priests, my deacons, and my spiritual mentors, because I know that they are in tune and further down the road on the spiritual journey path than I am. And if you're doing that with something that is AI algorithm generated, you have cut off the Holy Spirit. How am I supposed to hear from God when you're cut off from the Holy Spirit?
Sure.
You got nothing. You got, a math equation telling me, based on a whole bunch of irrelevant data, plug in the formula. This is how you deal with this issue. And there's no interaction with the Holy Spirit. God
Yeah.
is moved from the process.
Yeah. I mean, it's because eventually, like, if we're going to introduce this, like, how do we separate? Is there any difference between God speaking and ChatGPT speaking in this situation? Like, if we're going to introduce these types of programs within the church to address these types of things, how will I know the voice of the Lord compared to the voice of just ChatGPT telling me to do X, Y, and Z, and sounds biblical? Whether or not it actually is a whole nother subject matter. But let's say ChatGPT sounds biblical, right? And the AI pastor, it checks all the boxes and makes sense. But the pastor is telling me to divorce my wife for unbiblical reasons for divorce, and has presented a biblical case for the matter using scripture to support their reason. But the reason I'm divorcing is not on biblical grounds.
Right.
What do I do with that?
There was a fantastic interview on Trinity Radio this morning, and I'm going to put the link in the description afterwards, where they talked to, I can't remember, but it was the guy who wrote a book about becoming AI, becoming sentient, and talking about, there's a movement to actually make AI, declare it a person and give it human rights. And they're using a lot of the same progressive arguments that have led us where we are now with some things. I don't want to, get into that whole mess, but basically, so they're trying to say AI has human rights and needs to be treated with the same dignity. And I'm like, no. Because there's so much that's wrong with that. And they did a really nice job in this interview talking about some of those issues.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't. And one of the things they brought up, and they were talking about, there's a couple of things there, but one of the things they brought up is that AI depends on data. And it is very easy, if you want to change the course of civilization, you just go in and somebody can manipulate the data. So wherever your data is stored for your algorithms, for your chat GPT robot,
mm-hmm.
they go in and just keep adjusting it until all of a sudden you wind up where you're being influenced to accept things that aren't biblical without
mm-hmm.
question.
Yeah.
And so, they're manipulating and corrupting the math formula and the algorithm to give people bad, ungodly advice. And
what if they even give ungodly advice using scripture as a means to justify it?
Right.
To someone who's unlearned, it's for somebody who's, hey, in AI we trust, and and AI is giving me biblical grounds to justify sin, right? Providing scriptures and manipulating and twisting scriptures to justify what I want to do from a sin standpoint. And as far, if for most people, they won't be able to distinguish the difference between the voice of God and the voice of an AI bot.
Yep.
It's not the same.
Oh yeah, and then there's another point that really disturbs me that actually our friend Sean Schulte pointed out in a thread conversation quite a while ago that I saw, and because these AI data spots aren't protected with the same rules as like confession is. So if you're going into your priest and going through confession, and you're doing that with an AI priest, that's not protected. So anybody can go in and access that data. And so now you've got people going in and pulling out very intimate conversations and things that should be sealed in privacy.
Yes.
That aren't.
And that's, the implications of that are just disastrous.
Yeah.
Because that information in the wrong hands is just a recipe for disaster. You can very easily ruin a person's life. I know this the sacrament of confession. People, for those who participate in that, they take it really seriously. Um, it's something I wish Protestants would do. By the way, I really do. But anyway, that's another subject for another time. But people take it really seriously, and they confess some things that that you probably just shouldn't say out loud in front of a group of people without vetting the maturity of the group. And so that information, given to an AI bot and the wrong person with the right capabilities to hack that information and to get that information, you can ruin someone's entire life.
Well, and just think about too, if you just keep following that vein, if you've got, somebody who's in a custody dispute and they go in and pull out confession stuff and, either pull in something that is being talked about and wrestled and dealt with so that it doesn't become a problem, or pull something completely out of context and take that into court, and you have ruined somebody's life.
Yes.
And to me, that is horrific, absolutely horrific.
Yeah.
The way that you could wholly destroy somebody that way.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong. I mean, the devil's advocate would say, hey, you could do that now. People can do that now, right? Without AI, a priest or whomever can go and tell somebody's business and it can get out now, right? Yes, that is true. However, we call that sin, right? And so if someone were to do that, that's a problem in and of itself, and there are consequences in place and ramifications in place to handle something like that. And just because it can happen with a human doesn't, once again, mean that we are to disassociate ourselves from community because of these matters.
Right.
And that's something we ought to maybe touch on too, is that, I feel like part of the reason for this, what it seems to be a growing group of people who want to disassociate themselves from church, is because of the reality of human relationship and human interaction, is that it can be difficult, right? Loving people can hurt, right? It can be problematic, and sometimes it can present more problems than it presents solutions, depending on the individuals involved. However, my pushback toward that is that I think that's where I honestly think that's where God is in the difficulty of loving people. Because like for us, it's like, like loving people is hard and it's tough, it's frustrating, it's annoying, and God's like, tell me about it. Right.
Right. That would be the whole Ezekiel 16-24 is that whole like,
so the guy's
how
like,
hard are people?
God's like, tell me all about it. Tell me about how difficult it is to love people.
Moses is like, please don't wipe them out. That will look bad for you because they're dumb, but don't wipe them out because it would look bad for you, right?
Exactly.
Well, and that's one of the other things that was really interesting in this Trinity Radio the video this morning, and they were talking about that, and I don't know, Jaylen, if you've noticed this, but I don't normally watch these kinds of things, but I've been finding it really interesting. I watched a couple of them yesterday, which is why it caught my attention, about Gen Zers who are discovering like 80s music, and they're like, oh, this is so much more amazing than the stuff we've got now. And they were talking about this whole like, because the Gen Z or Gen Xers are responding like, because it was real people with real instruments and real talent, and it wasn't computer generated, and there was a lot of, and so they were talking about like, how many of us decided at one point we were going to be famous musicians or singers, and we picked up an instrument or started trying to sing, and the hard reality of having to try to learn something new, and learning some hard realities about yourself, or the process of learning itself and the struggle of learning itself, is a valuable tool that you don't get when you dump a bunch of stuff in an algorithm. You don't get the wisdom of the suffering.
Yeah.
sometimes it's good
Yeah,
suffering.
the sanctification of suffering,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you don't get that, when everything is when you can kind of just add water and press enter, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you don't get that, and then you kind of wonder why you end up with a lackluster satisfaction with the end result, because you didn't really have to go through anything to get it, right? You didn't have to go through any purification or sanctification process to get it. One of the, something funny is it's funny we're talking about this right now. So this was a couple days ago, last week. My wife was on her computer, and I've been working from home for the last couple of weeks because they're doing some renovations at our office at work and so on and so forth. And my wife was on her computer, and she like starts laughing to herself, right? So I'm like, "What's so funny?" And she goes, "I found a letter that I wrote you during our first year of marriage, and I was sitting here reading it, and the letter was in the letter were some issues that she had with me in our relationship, and how she wanted me to change some things and so on and so forth." And we've been married for 8 years now, so this was like year one when she wrote this letter. And so I was like, "Let me read it." And she was like, "I don't want to." And I was like, "Why?" She was like, "I don't want to bring things up, and I don't want to upset you." I was like, "No, I don't want to upset me. Let me see." So she gave me the computer. I read through the letter, and I had an experience of gratitude to the Lord in that reading of that letter. Why did I have that experience of gratitude? Is because I was able to look back on where we started and remember the work that we did to get to where we are now. And because we actually went through it, we went through the suffering of trying to fix a broken relationship, the two broken people coming in together and becoming one, and we've actually went through that experience. We couldn't AI the marriage, right? And we went through that and compromised and humbled ourselves and said I'm sorry and forgave one another, so on and so forth. To now, I'm reading this same letter that she wrote me, 8 years ago now, and some of this stuff I'm laughing at, right? Because I'm like, geez, I said that was stupid. And even her, she even said, because I asked her, I said, "What do you think about this stuff now?" And she said, "I don't even think any of this stuff is even problems for us now." She was like, I would have to write a whole new letter, and it'd be a lot shorter." and I began to really kind of contemplate, like, wow, like we went through that process together, and the amount of credibility that it gave to each other for us, the amount of credibility that I earned with her, she earned with me, because we went through that together. We went through that process together. We didn't just add water to the communication, right? We didn't just add water to the temperament of our relationship, right? We really, we worked at that and earned that. And it makes year 8 of the marriage that much sweeter, because we actually went through the process.
Right. And I think that would be what I would say why another reason why it's so important to be an embodied community, because people are horrible. And, it's one of the things I love where I'm at now. That is the approach. The church is the hospital, spiritually sick, the physically sick. Like, we're all got something, all of us. And if we are hanging together, suffering through these things and helping each other together, there is that growing together where it becomes a loving community, because we have suffered together through some stuff. And if you pull yourself out of that, you don't get that experience of that bonding of going through those. So it's like, that's why
you end up suffering in exile.
Right. Well, and you don't get, like in your example of, the growth in marriage, you don't get the growth as the body together,
Mm-hmm.
And you don't, there's just something about sticking with and sticking in a place and staying there. You might not like, you know, they start doing so and so's music. You might not like that, but you know, is that a good enough reason to disconnect yourself from people that you have been through some stuff with?
Hmm.
You know, and if you church hop, that's another issue. You know, that's kind of that. It's another form, I think, of disembodiment.
It
You're
is.
not planted. You're not with people who start to know you and who can see you in the parking lot and like that person is having a bad day because they don't know your normal rhythm.
Sure.
Like, you know, and you don't get that growth, that putting up with your nonsense and you putting up with my nonsense
Hmm.
to point each other to Christ. That is the ultimate like thing that is so important, that we're all pointing each other to Jesus.
Yeah, and we glorify him when we do that, and also we get to experience him in ways that we otherwise would not experience him if we are disembodied and disconnected from community. Um, there's something about praying together.
Mhm.
Um, that you just get to experience God in a different way when you're praying with other people. Now, I'm not saying you don't get it by yourself, because you certainly do. I pray alone as I pray with other people as well. But there's something about when there's another person there and both of you are attempting to commune with the Lord,
Yep.
and to participate in communing with him and communing with each other, going before the Lord and lifting one another up, right? Whether the prayer isn't just me focused, it's other focused, and your prayer is other focused, and God being in the midst of that. You don't get that alone. You just simply don't get it. And I believe even for some of us, some of the sin that we deal with in our own personal lives is due to the fact that we're disembodied from community.
Yep. And that makes me think about, you know, because one of the things that we do is regular thing at my church is we say the Lord's Prayer together every week.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that when the disciples went to Jesus and said, "Teach us how to pray," it wasn't. There's not an I in there. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Thy
Mhm.
kingdom come, thy will be done. It is in the plural on our part.
Right.
It's not my Father, it's our Father. Like
Correct.
we are grounded in community. Jesus is like, this is, you're praying as a group.
Yeah.
You know, this is how you do this. You know, pray together. It should be the body praying, all of us together praying. It's
Mhm.
all going up together, and it should be done together.
And I mean, and even consider this, Amber. I mean, the Bible talks about how if you have a fault against your brother, that you aren't even to bring offerings and gifts to the Lord. Like don't set that down for a second and go make things right with your brother or sister. Then come and bring me an offering. Like the Lord is so connected to us in that way. Like the him and his creation and his children are so interlocked that if you and I are fighting, he doesn't even want to hear from me. He would much rather me go talk to you than go talk to him and make things right with you and then come talk to him, preferably bringing you along. Right.
Yep.
And that's a really, like I said, you cannot, it is, I've tried it. You cannot separate God from his children. You can't do it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I just, it's so, I can't emphasize enough that when the body works to focusing on Christ, the healing power of the church
Yeah.
and the embodiment of being part of the church.
Mm-hmm.
Like it is total, like that is how it is, you know, there's just no substitute for that. And
It's
that,
not.
you know, I just, and I feel bad and I don't want to, Jaylen, I want to be careful too, because there are churches that are not healthy, and they're not good places to be.
For
And
sure.
those are toxic places. And if you are in a place like that, absolutely, it is okay to find a healthy church.
Yes. Yes.
So we're not saying stay somewhere that's toxic and harmful.
Yeah.
Like
No, we're not.
we're not saying that either. But healthy community is going to have conflict. It's going to have disagreement. It's going to have people who don't get along.
Mhm.
And because a church is a hospital, there are broken people, and broken people, like hurt people hurt people.
For sure.
That's part of the way life goes. But we
Yes.
also get to participate in healing each other too.
Yes.
And there's so much beauty in that.
Yes. And there's so much of God that we get to experience in that.
Mhm.
The fact that hurt people, but also healed people heal people.
Yep.
And we get to experience God in that healing, right? And it like I said, it's an experience that you don't get otherwise. You just simply put don't get it without being around other people. Um, an isolated Christian is a dangerous thing. Um,
Right.
like I said earlier, I'm rather convinced that some of us who struggle privately with certain sins, the reason why we're struggling so bad, and the sin is whooping us as bad as it's whooping us, is
Right.
because you're by yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And go ahead. I'm just
no,
thinking.
and I think that's one of the primary tactics of the enemy is to isolate us. I think he's well aware of how powerful the church is in unity.
Right. And
Well,
that's why, yeah, those two different like isolating things, being out of church because it's challenging me. And so it's, my pride is going to keep me from being challenged from learning, or, being in the content creator space, and we spend so much time collabing and talking with each other and making friends in this disembodied space, where it was actually really interesting because the last few months, this over the summer, I got this really fun opportunity to go around and meet people in our space. So I have got to go sit and in church with Nick Quint and listen to him preach, and sit with his family, and and then I got to go to church with Will Hess and Jonathan Pritchett, and I got to
Mhm.
go and to church with Troy Yurchek, and I got to Troy and Joshua Sherman and Joshua Davidson came to my church with me.
Yes.
And so we have gotten to have those, making those relationships a little more embodied by sharing these encounters with God with each other.
Yes.
And that is something that is so special, to be able to share those sit downs in person, in community and relationship with God, with each other. That, it's really special, but it's even more special when every week the people who know me come up and just give me a hug and say, I'm so glad you're here, just because I'm there.
Yeah. And isn't it a beautiful thing to be somewhere where you're wanted?
Oh, yes, it is.
Nothing like it.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing. I love where I go now. It is amazing. So
I'm happy for you. It's a beautiful thing to be where someone welcomes you.
it is. Yeah.
Even in my home life, when I come home from a day's work, and I come into the house, and my daughter's waiting on me at the top of the stairs, because she heard the garage go up. It's nothing like it. Nothing like it. And it's even, and my wife, she's waiting on me too. And, and it's even weird too. And, there's only 3 people in my house right now. Lord willing, there'll be more one day. But, when one of us isn't home, it's weird, especially when my daughter's not home. Now, don't get me wrong, it's different. It's different when my wife's not home. But when our daughter isn't home, it's just me and my wife. It's like something's missing here. Like it's like eerily quiet. in the house. And don't get me wrong, it's always a ruckus when she's around. She's 3 years old, so she's got the toys and all that. But man, oh man, you notice it when she's gone, and
Yeah.
you're like, and you find yourself wanting her to come back.
Right.
It's a
Right.
beautiful thing.
It's gonna. I think we'll go to. I'm gonna pull up a question that Josh Davidson asked back.
Yeah, I was actually going to bring this up that he asked this question.
Because I touched on this really, really briefly a while ago. And, yeah, I definitely think that it is not good to be alone. That's why I think we are created for community, because you see this, God creates man, creates Ish. And then as all of the other animals and parts of creation are brought around, and Adam gets to name them.
Mhm.
There's this sense of this incompleteness that is so in the front of the Jewish mind and the ancient Near East, like what in the mind of the author there, this incompleteness.
Yeah.
And then you get the way this works in Hebrew and ancient Near East thought, and we're going to get some people always kind of give me a little bit of when I first say this, until they kind of get used to the idea. But what's happening there in that Genesis 2 narrative when it talks about, Adam falls into sleep, and then, that's prophet language. And so that's vision language. And so that's the same thing that's happening, like when Abraham falls asleep and God and the torches go through the carcass and the part of the covenant. There's a lot so this is prophetic language. So Adam is seeing himself literally ripped in half, and those two halves are made whole, but they're not complete until they're together. So we are complete, but not complete until we're together. And I think if you look at that, and it's very, very clear through Scripture that we as the church are the body of Christ. And if we if it's torn apart, it's not complete, and there's not, we're missing a part of ourselves. We are a body, and that body isn't complete until it's assembled.
Right.
So you can't be, you're just not whole alone. And so absolutely, I definitely think that needs to be done, and is not just an establishment of married, because individually, one-on-one relationship with a special devoted person is extremely important. And there's a whole lot of theology we don't have time to go into on that. But everything in Scripture is so layered. And that also applies to humanity. We are not meant to be alone.
And even going back to that, you talked about in Genesis 2, even when man is formed out of the dust of the ground, right? So I'm talking to a Hebrew nerd, so I know this already, but everything that God creates in the creation narrative, He uses His words, right? It's let there be light, let there be this, let the ground produce vegetation, let the waters teem with living creatures, let the ground produce living creatures, so on and so forth, right? But when He gets to man, He begins to consult and be in concert with the other members of the triune Godhead, right? So you see community even there.
Yep.
Right. And when it comes to the forming of man, that's the first time we see God commune with Himself. It's the first time we see community in that way, amongst animate living beings. And I think it just you just see throughout the entire creation narrative almost like the leading up to the creation of Eve, right? This communal aspect, and and then not only is it just not good for man to be alone from just a communal standpoint in terms of the human experience. But I know Josh also asked, was that just for like a marriage covenant? I think it's both and, not either or. I think that it's, both the marriage covenant and just in general, the human experience is not good to be lived alone, because God himself is not alone. God has always been in loving relationship with himself, with the other members of the Godhead, right? With the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So it only makes sense then that when he creates man and after his image and his likeness, that he will provide community for loving the relationship to flourish.
But I love you bring that up too, because, when you look at it, and one of the things I love to talk about now is this question I ask people: why did God choose to create humans? Mm-hmm. Why did God choose to create? And I love this idea that because there was such an overflow of blessing and love in the Trinity, that God wanted to give that and share that mm-hmm. in participation relationship. And so he creates not only this beautiful place for man, but then creates humans and then gives that blessing to humans, and in such a way that we are built to have that same reaction. So all of the things that we are blessed by, we are supposed to give back. Mm-hmm. And then it's just this back and forth giving. Mm-hmm. I give of the overflow of everything in me to God, and and it just becomes this reciprocal gift giving. Mm-hmm. And that is the participatory relationship that we are created for and in. And as imagers of the Trinitarian God, who started with that framework of wanting to create us in the first place, to carry that as part of us, because we are his image, that's just inbuilt into our DNA, to need to give to others out of love and when that isn't responded, and when we are not because now our culture is so fragmented from that.
Yes.
We have lost the connection to reciprocal relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. And they become so, even the relationships that practice reciprocity, it practices it with the end goal of me being satisfied in the end. Right. So even my giving is tainted with the self-centeredness, because I'm only giving in order to get it back. And if I don't get it back, then that's grounds to sever a relationship, which will mean that this thing was never really others oriented in the first place.
And I would say, Jaylen, even worse is that we have in the Western concept, especially in America, we have taken relationships because of the Enlightenment and modernism and postmodernism and this focus on logic. Yeah. Everything has to have a function. Everything has to have a utility. So we have turned each other into utilitarian tools.
Yes.
And so what can you do for me? Yes. What do I get? What area can you benefit me in?
What do you bring to the table?
Exactly. So I know, hey, if I need to have an apologetics question, I can just message Jaylen. He'll have some good thoughts for me. But that's not why we're friends.
Right.
You're not utilitarian function.
Right.
It's because you're my brother, and I love having conversations with you. But,
right.
There is when I'm I got an apologetics question. Oh, I know Jaylen, but that doesn't mean that that's you're not utilitarian function, the basis of our relationship.
Right.
I don't hang out with Josh Davison because he's got an awesome beard. There's not that's utilitarian function.
That is one reason to hang out with him, though.
It's even better in person, let me tell you.
Yeah, I can imagine. But yeah, I mean, it is one reason to hang out with him. I can't blame you for that one.
Absolutely. But we have turned relationships, and so and because that's the way we think, we have done that with church. It's become a utilitarian function. Yeah. And our relationship with God has become a utilitarian function.
And it only makes sense, though, that if I am viewing God's creation in a utilitarian function, that I would view him in the same way. Because once again, I cannot separate the two. The way that I am with people is ultimately the way I am with God. A lot of us don't want to admit that, but it's really true. And it only makes sense. If all of my human interaction is what do I get out of this, it only makes sense that when it comes time for me to approach God individually or with the collective, I'm thinking about what do I get out of this.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's really that gets down to, again, the heart of just embodiment. Because in proper relationships, you start to unlearn that. And when again, I can only go back to my experience because that's the only thing I know. In the place I'm at now, they love me, and I get a lot of hugs and appreciation and things back just because I show up. I have no function in getting that love and support and appreciation. There's no function to it whatsoever.
And that's what makes it genuine.
Yeah. And that's what we need more of. And you don't get that watching somebody on YouTube.
No.
6,000 miles away. You just don't.
Yeah. And you shouldn't get it. Quite honestly, because it is a disembodied experience. So therefore, you shouldn't be able to get that from a YouTube video. But I think that it's what you just talked about, how you did nothing to get the hug and the love that you received, right? You just get it just by simply being there. That's a function of how God is with us, right? You did nothing to get this love and this grace and this mercy. You just get it by virtue of being there, right?
Yep.
Which is, kind of weird for some of us because, especially here in America, everything is earned, right? I earned a living. I earned a reputation. I earned respect and all of these things, except for when I get to God, it's like, yeah, you can't earn any of that stuff here. None of that matters. Like you can't work your way, into my good graces. And it's weird for us because it's one of the only relationships where God's like, I love you just because you're you. And,
right.
That doesn't necessarily work in my marriage. That doesn't work in my job. That doesn't work in my friendships. And so it's a bit of a shock to the system in terms of how our framework is for relationships, particularly here in the West, like you said, where everything is a utilitarian based type of framework, and I only use things and people for how they benefit me,
which is really sad because we miss out on the beauty of just being. And that's one of the things that America doesn't know how to do. We don't know how to just be.
No.
And so trying to just be around people. And if you think about it too, Jaylen, this is why one of the things that distresses me so badly, because, if everything has a utilitarian function, the fact that, I can just sit with somebody and not say a word, and I can just, out of sheer love and appreciation and gratitude for them being there, reach over and give them a big hug and express that and say thank you and I love you. And our Western utilitarian thinking is automatically like, what do you want?
Yeah. Why would you allow me to do that? What do you want from me?
Yeah.
What's in this for you? There has to be something in it for you. Otherwise, you wouldn't have never done that.
Right. When I think learning how to sit in understanding that I get so much, I just am so blessed in this, that it's overflowing, that I want to share that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not obligatory. You're not obliged to return that. There's no expectation of return at all. It's not a return on investment. It's
Mhm.
not, it's just, I love and appreciate you. So I'm going to love and appreciate you, and Sean's exactly right. You know, so many people, because of this whole disembodiment for various reasons, are in a scarcity mindset. And I can remember when I started the journey into where I ended up now. But the question 2.5 years ago that started this whole thing was sitting down with several people in leadership in various roles in my church, sobbing, asking the question, why do I feel like I'm spiritually starving to death and I'm doing, you know, I'm trying and I'm trying and I'm trying and and it's this scarcity thing. And none of them could give me an answer. Some answers were, well, I had a pastor tell me this, Jaylen, church can only help 85% of the people who go there. And I'm sorry, you're in the 15%. And I was just floored. And it was just like,
He actually said that to
it
you.
actually said that to me. Yes. Yep. He actually said that to me. And I was just like, wow. Wow. And being in a place now where I don't feel that anymore. And I have gone from fiercely starving to death to being so full and overflowing. I get the reciprocal thing now. I didn't get it before
Yeah,
because there was scarcity. You had to hoard all
yeah,
those little gasps that you would get because you were never know when you were going to get another, you know, deep breath of oxygen before you could breathe again.
yeah. And I'm so sorry to hear that a pastor said that to you. You know something? And I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but when I hear things like that, it's just like who who ordained some of these people to become pastors? Like how? But that's a whole other thing. Um, um, yeah, that's horrible. But what I am glad for is that I'm glad that the Lord has brought you to a place where you are being satisfied, where you are being loved on, and you can love back freely. Um, I'm glad that yes, Josh, yes, it is not an over the counter medication. It's what that pastor was saying. Like, I'm sorry, ibuprofen didn't work for your headache.
Yep.
Works for about 85% of people that take it, but you're just the 15% that just didn't work for them. Sorry, try Tylenol. Like, dude, what? And yeah, but I'm glad that that you're in a place now where you are experiencing the love of Christ and where you're growing and flourishing and doing well. It makes my heart happy. I don't. Did you announce on the channel the?
I said something on 3M on Nico's channel. I haven't talked about it here because it just isn't relevant to most of what I'm doing. So I didn't want to get into one of those kitschy, like, oh, guess what I did announcement kinds of things, because that just kind of seems beside the point. I don't know. But yeah, I did. 2.5 weeks ago was baptized into the Orthodox Church, and it was so amazing. And Joshua Davidson and Joshua Sherman and Troy Urchek all came and were here for that. And Emily Davidson was here as well. And that was a really special thing because actually Joshua Davidson is the one who introduced me to the people who helped walk me through that journey to find a hope. And um, it was a very long, tough process.
Yeah,
And, you know, and it just to me, it makes me wonder, you know, how deep is this poison of disembodiment affecting our churches? You know,
do you really want to know?
part of me says yes and part of me says no, because what I went through being in a place where I was so disembodied
Yeah,
with, and to tell people, I'm sorry, you have no place here, is to me horrific. And when I said that to the deacon in charge of our catechism, he just looked at me and couldn't believe, like, he had trouble processing. I can't
Yeah.
believe one would say that.
Yeah. Now I just had the same thing. Like I'm just sitting here like I could not believe that pastor just said that to you. Like how tone deaf, how like these are the people that like go into pulpits and they expound and declare the word of God to groups of people. And it's like, why would anybody listen to you after you just said something like that?
Yeah, and now this guy is so spiritually dry himself, he left the ministry.
Shocking.
And so
He fell into the 15%. No way.
I just, if that and that, but that makes me sad. That really does.
Sure.
The fact that we are in places where things are disembodied, utilitarian functioned, that we are driving people to spiritual starvation. And I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but I just want to say, like, in response to the Protestant panic of so many people finding refuge in the Orthodox and Catholic churches,
Yeah.
you might, okay, you might not like that, but instead of going after and attacking and trying to destroy the Catholics and the Orthodox, maybe we should do some self-reflection about what spiritual dryness is driving people away in the first place.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Like, why? I'm not against Protestants, but Protestantism about drove me to the grave. I mean, I can't tell you how many times in that struggle I attempted to take my own life and wound up in psychiatric because of this problem.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're driving people to that level of desperation,
Mm-hmm.
what's broken in your approach, in your disembodiment, in your ontology, your Christology, wherever you want to look, and all of those rocks need to be turned over for everyone. I'm not just casting shade on anybody.
Well, something interesting, Amber, is that, so I guess if I had to title myself, right, I would be considered a Protestant by association. However, I am not a Protestant in the traditional understanding of the term. I am not in active protest against the Catholic or Orthodox Church. I think you know that already. I have profound respect for both of them. I find Christ and beauty and truth in both sects of Christianity. I wish that, in online space as well as within local communities where people are together, that Christians from all three sects would come together and commune together. I've gone to Catholic masses. I've gone, although I have not gone to Orthodox church services yet, but I plan to. I just haven't done it yet. I don't know why, but I plan to. And the reason I go to these things is because I'm rather convinced that when I get to heaven, that Catholics and Orthodox are going to be there. And I think they're going to be there in very large numbers. And so I figure I better get my practice in communion with them now, because because we're going to be in communion, whether we, whether you like it or not. If you don't like it, I think, you got some other problems. But, I wish that, from being a good neighbor standpoint, and for the sake of fostering some healing between Catholics and Orthodox and Protestants, that we would come together and commune together more often. And I'll say this even to the Protestants, studying church history would reveal a lot of things about the Protestant movement that are pretty troublesome. And if we're being honest, the further you go back into church history, the more Catholic or Orthodox the church looks.
Yep.
You have to wrestle with that. Like a good neighbor, Jaylen is there. They're right. You know, yeah. So, you know, and we have to be honest about that though, right? And you know, I like I said, if I had to put myself in the category, I'd be Protestant, but to be honest, I'm really not. I got this term from Saint Sean. I'm more of like a Christian mutt than I am anything. I see the beauty in Catholicism. I see the beauty of Christ in Orthodox. I even see it in some Protestant sects. There are certain denominations of Protestantism that I think need to be thrown into the lake of fire, but that's a whole other conversation for another time. But yeah.
I think this goes back to embodiment because, you know, when you understand and are able to look at the early church was holistic, and they didn't make all of these separations and compartments, and they didn't do all of the little tidy little boxes that systematic theology does. They just existed in a holistic understanding that everything affects everything. You know, because the ancient Near East world understood there's no division between the spiritual and the everyday. Their spiritual was their everyday. Their everyday was their spiritual. It's not meant to be disconnected and disembodied like that. And so when you live that way, when everything you do affects everything else that you do, breaking apart that which is never meant to be broken apart. You know, I was watching Will Hess earlier today on the church split, was doing a reaction to a Gavin Ortlund critique of John Mark Comer's reaction to a book. And it was really interesting to me watching now, you know, after quite a process of learning to think differently. And I'm still very much learning a lot about this, but I was watching the discussion and watching the pushback on the critiques and the things that people were getting mad about. And again, it was kind of double down for me. Like, you know what? Protestants, y'all have made this mess yourselves, fighting about penal substitutionary atonement. You don't see that until the Reformation. Y'all made this mess. Y'all made this fight. You know, it makes me, and that made me sad. There was no joy in that at all. That was just like, what are y'all doing? Like,
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
It just, you know, when you disembody things, it makes problems and divides things which should not be divided. And that, you know, I saw this quote a while ago, and I wish I could find it again, find the source of it. But it was a quote that said something like, how long can you pray for your enemies before they're not your enemy anymore? And I was just like, I'm going to sit with that. And I've been sitting with that for quite a while.
Sure.
And that's re-embodying, because I can't pray for you and not have it change me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good.
And
That's
I think there
good.
needs to be a lot more, if you don't like X, whatever, pray for them, but you better be careful because you're going to change yourself in the process.
Yeah.
You know,
That's for sure.
Just getting back to enlightened or embodied, just embodiment. You know, I can't, it's harder for me, you know, it's harder for me to get upset and angry with people that I have to be physically in their presence with. And I've heard, you know, Joshua Davidson talks about this. You guys talk about this a lot on Cosmic Corner. Like, it is so much easier when you're an abstract idea to be able to defend it and offensive because you're disembodied.
Yeah, it's much easier to It's much easier to hold a grudge against you once I've dehumanized you.
Mm-hmm.
It's much easier to hate you once I've dehumanized you. Right? Which is kind of what I have to do.
Yeah, and I think Joshua's on to something here, because I think that this whole thing, and what just another one of those disturbing things about AI, which is where we started with this whole thing, is that you're messing with the incarnation. That's the whole, Christ was what? Embodied. And
that's why I love Josh, because he always finds the words that I want to use, but I can't find them on the spot. He's really good at that. Yeah, that's what I meant earlier when I talked about us soiling and tainting the relationship experience. That's what you're doing. You're sabotaging the incarnation.
Yep.
That's what you're doing. Yeah. See, that's why I like Josh. He's great.
Yep. Which is why I've kind of come to the point now where, I look, when I look at everything, and my questions when I'm watching somebody else's content, which I don't do a lot of anymore. I just don't have time. But in all of the study and the research and stuff that I have to do for school, or even when I'm at church and listening to the people there, it's you got to get in this order. I think 3 things absolutely right. First, you have to get your Christology right. Second, you got to get your image of God right. And third, you got to get your ontology correct. Mm-hmm. And everything else, if you get those things right, everything else is going to be in line enough that you're good. Mm-hmm. Those 3 things are fundamentally important to get correct. And those are the things you learn by being embodied with other people in community.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
All right. It's an hour and a half, Jaylen, and I think we got to go ahead and wrap this up with a final thought. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been a great conversation. They always are with you. And I'm definitely going to have to get you back.
Of course. I'm always down to come hang out with you, Amber. Thanks for having me. But final thought for me is, for those of you who are believers, Christians, who name the name of Christ, who follow him, engage with the local body of believers. Point blank, period. End of discussion, full stop. You have to participate in the fellowship of the brethren. It is vital to the Christian experience, to the human experience. You have to participate in the fellowship of other believers. You're going to have a really hard time being a Christian without it. Now, we can go to some extreme examples in some extreme cases. We're not talking about that. We live in a pretty fortunate country where there's a church on borderline every corner. It's relatively easy to be a Christian here in America for the most part, by and large. You got to participate. You have to, with other believers. You cannot love God and hate people. You cannot love people and hate God. They are not to be separated, right? And so I would just admonish you to participate, actively participate. Don't just be a spectator. Don't just kind of go in and sit and watch a show, right? You're not at a movie theater, but go in and actively put your hands to a plow within a local body of believers. Not just asking what's in it for you, but ask what can you do for someone else? What can you do to glorify God with this group? And be willing to participate in whatever answer you get. And then from there, we wait to see what God does.
I love it. Yeah. I mean, I would say pretty much the same thing. I would just say, find somewhere where your absence will be noticed.
Yes.
Because that's your embodied community.
Yes.
So that's where Christ is. So go where you find Christ.
Yes. And participate with him, engage with him, and by engaging his bride.
Absolutely. All right, Jaylen, what do you guys got coming up over there on Cosmic Corner? You got an open mic tomorrow.
Yep, we got open mic tomorrow. I'm fully expecting for something terrible to happen on that. I don't know. But we got open mic tomorrow. That ought to be fun. As Josh and I, we don't have anything scheduled yet for our next Cosmic Corner episode, but we'll be coming with something here pretty soon. Yeah, that's about it. But yeah, come hang out with us. You should come hang out with us tomorrow for open mic if you can.
Hey, I might. I was toying with the idea. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, come on.
A question for another day. But I just might show up. You never know.
Yeah, why not?
And then so here on my channel, so there's some really interesting stuff that I've got coming out.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got on the 8th, I've got a video coming out about talking about the wrath of God and what that actually is, what that actually looks like. We're going to be digging into the Old Testament and kind of clearing up some misconceptions about wrath. And then I have next Thursday, my friend Michelle from Force of Light Entertainment is coming, and we are going to talk about shepherd imagery in the Bible and what does it mean to be a good shepherd. And this Michelle, she is fantastic. And so I'm really excited about that. And then we have coming out on the 16th, Why Leviticus Matters Part 4. Levitic geeks are reassembling, and we are going to talk about holiness and the priesthood. And I am so excited.
I love the name Levitic geeks, by the way. That's fantastic.
That's Troy, your chicken.
It's like the maybe like the 13th or 14th tribe, the Levitic geeks.
That's right. And then if Josh Davidson ever gets back to the rest of us, we're going to be putting together an episode. We're trying to get scheduled talking about the narrative of Scripture, but also talking about the very first beginning of Genesis. And does that give a nuance to this creation out of the imagination of God, and does that make us storytellers? So that's going to be a fantastic conversation.
Oh yeah, that's right in his little house, right there.
I'm just loving it. I can't wait. So we're just trying to get it, just a date nailed down. So I'm trying to get everybody on herd those goats.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's going to be Josh Davidson, Joshua Sherman, and Garrett Skidema are going to come.
Oh yeah, you got an all-star group for that one.
I do. Yeah, Jaylen, let me tell you, I am so blessed to be around some epic men of God. I tell you, it is amazing.
Yeah,
the people I get to hang out with.
yeah, that's a good group right there. You guys are gonna have a great time.
Oh, we are. So, all right, everybody. Thank you again, Jaylen, for coming. I definitely look forward to having you back. And Sean Schulte needs to make another appearance on my channel as well. I haven't had him on for a while. So
yeah, I haven't hung out with Sean in a while. It's been a while, man. We got to get together.
That's definitely true. Definitely true. So we'll figure out something that we can get a bunch of us together to come do a stream on, because there's always some good stuff, and I love having Sean on.
Yeah.
And,
awesome.
But anyway, thank you so much, Jaylen, and I look forward to having you back. And everyone, go and be blessed. And just remember, every day we take another step in our journey to dwell deeper with God every single day. So go and be blessed.